Assalamu alaikum to all of you, and this is Almas Abbasali. I'm the head of education South. Before we further proceed on, can you please write in the chat section if you can hear us and you can see the presenter, okay? Please write in your chat box if you can hear us and see us as well. All right, thank you very much, Fatma and Zaman, for letting us know that you can hear us. So with this, I welcome you all again in the third webinar of the series of the SBL Bridging the Gap webinars, which are meant to be helping and supporting students who are studying the strategic business leader of the ACCA qualification. Let me share with you briefly the objectives of organizing these webinars. We know that the SBL is examined using a 100% integrated case study, examining across a breadth of the organization functions. The SBL examination mainly assesses the technical and professional skills of the potential leaders need to demonstrate in senior positions within organizations. Since SBL examination is a highly practical and most of the students in Pakistan may not be having the right practical exposure at the time of studying SBL. Therefore, ACCA has planned these sessions where industry experts are invited to broaden their horizon on the identified topics, which helps you appreciate its relevance with the practical world. Today's session is on leadership and organizational culture. To share the industry knowledge and insights on this topic, I am joined by Zishan Shahid, who is the partner forensic SNO Deloitte Yusuf Adil. I'm happy to share his brief profile with you, and then with a couple of housekeeping announcements I'll share with you. So welcome, Zishan, for today's session. Zishan is a partner with 16 years of experience in advisory and consulting with Deloitte, Pakistan. He has experience in providing advisory and consulting services to leading financial sector, pharmaceutical, FMCG, public sector, and energy sector clients. Zishan is an associate chartered accountant from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. Now, some housekeeping announcements I would like to share. That if you have any question during the session, please write in the chat panel, and we will try to answer maximum question in the Q&A break. And in case during the session, if you cannot hear the speaker's voice or his video, please then rejoin the session. We will also be recording this session, and the recording will be shared with all the participants after this session. So with this, I hand over the session to Zishan. Over to you, Zishan.
Thank you, Almas. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Apologies for the delay in the start of the session. It is a practical challenge that practical leaders have to manage. Monday is usually a very rough day in work environment. Those of you who are working would probably understand. Without further much ado, I would like to initiate this slide deck that you might be seeing on your screen right now. Do I put it in presentation mode? Okay. So the slide deck is just to guide the talking point that I would like to share with you as somebody who has been leading a segment of the organization and who has been involved in the strategic and leadership roles within the firm as well. So here to share my thoughts. This slide deck is basically to guide the talking points that we will discuss during the session. So there are basically some textbook elements, but there are certain practical elements as well. When we talk about leadership, we are talking about different aspects of an individual in a role of a leader that is responsible for two things basically. One, to achieve in entirety or a segment of an organization's goals and objectives. That's one role. And while doing so, being responsible for a workforce of people who are working under the leadership of that person, guiding them, developing them, and trying to achieve the organization objectives on the way. So there are certain behavioral aspects of it. There are certain influential aspects of leadership. There are situational aspects, and there are integrative dimensions. Leadership is not something that can be explained scientifically. It's not a symptom that you have to possess, but it is. It does comprise of certain basic attribute that every leader should possess. Because see, being a leader is not a technical issue. You can start your startup tomorrow and call yourself a chief executive, and you might be very successful in doing that. But being a leader means inhibiting those qualities that people would like to follow you. Leadership itself is nothing. A leader is nothing without a follower, and that follower can only follow you for either under a slavery ship condition where they have no choice but to follow you. But a true leader is someone whose follower are following that person because of their trust in the leadership abilities, as well as their trust in the leader for having the best interest of the followers in heart. Now there are certain, leadership role. It's not just the head of the organization that is basically the leader. A leader can be found in very different tiers. I'll give you an example of, for example, Karachi Electric. You see those teams that actually go out there and serve us as consumers. And in that scenario, those teams are divided into a pyramid structure where there's a team leader, and then there are certain people who are supporting that team leader. So we have one aspect where at a very macro level, you have a team which has a leader and some followers. And on the organization-wide level, you have top management. Now, that top management, whether it is one person or it is a group of person that is running the organization, those are the leaders. Now, their role is different. On the top of the organization, the role of the leader is to visualize future strategy, situate the organization, and obviously, if they are making any changes, they're developing the organization, then they have to be the first one to personify that change. So that's the high level leadership. But then you have middle level leadership as well. You've got middle managers whose role is twofold. One is to lead the teams that are working in their own areas. The other is to support the top management in achieving the organization objectives. You see, if you are a CEO of an organization and that organization has a staff of 50, 60 people, that's a very small organization. If your approach, you're not a lean organization, if your approach is to directly interact with the bottommost level, bypassing the middle management level, that does not inspire a lot of trust. Sometimes it is very acceptable to do so, but it does not inspire a lot of trust from the middle management because their authority is overridden. So middle managers have to be trusted to be leaders for their own teams and to be advisors to the top management. They are the buffer between the ground realities of the organization and the strategic moves that the top leadership is making. So they make sense of how to translate the broader future vision into actual achievable results on ground, and they have a very key role in taking feedback from the ground to the top management and taking guidance from the top management and implementing on the ground. So the middle tier is a very strong leadership tier in its own right. Now, core leadership skills. You see 5 boxes here, but those 5 boxes are not something that a leadership definition can be confined in. In real life, your leadership has a different, various diverse type of attribute that you can give to a leader. For example, if you take example of Steve Jobs, he was not a very meaning he was a visionary. He took Apple from a very troubled organization to one of the highest revenue generating organizations in US. And but if you read about the experiences of the people who worked for him, they might not all be very positive. And then you have certain leaders who are like, for example, there was a recent exit of a very long-standing CEO of a car manufacturing organization, and you would see that the entire company came out to give him a farewell of that sort. So there are different types of leader. Both may be achieving the results which are required by the organization, but both may have very completely different attributes as far as a person is concerned. But there are certain commonalities. Without a vision, a leader cannot be called a leader. He or she has to have a vision. You see, no organization is out there which is not trying to achieve any purpose. And I'm not just talking about uh, corporate organizations which are out there to make money, to derive the maximum benefit for their shareholders, but also social enterprises, also philanthropic organization. Any organization that is out there to achieve any objective, it cannot do so if the leadership lacks vision. Now, a very good leader without a vision will result in a very short duration enterprise. People will have fun in that organization. People will like working there, but the organization will not sustain because the vision is going to end up now or somewhere in the later, not resulting in a sustainable organization. Then the leader has to be distinct. The leader distinction has to be there. Usually, if you learn about, for example, Asad Umar's experience in Angro, I mean, from what I've heard, from the very start of his career, he was earmarked as somebody who's going to be a very senior leader within the organization. So, with their conduct, with their hard work, leaders are often identified from a very start that how they might be distinct from their counterparts. Then, strategic thinking. Having a vision is like having a dream. Having a strategy is actually making the blueprint of how to achieve that dream. So strategic thinking is very important. That okay, if you have started a operation, you are a leader, and you want to be, for example, the provider to transport services in 15 or 50% of Pakistan. But if you don't have a strategy to go with that, the vision is just a dream. It can never become a foundation of an organization where you will work on. Then there's commitment. Now, commitment is something that a leader can never compromise on, and we see the lack of commitment being translated into failure very rapidly in certain organizations. I was having a discussion with somebody who was working in an insurance industry, and it was a very good insight that I learned from that person. Is that for insurance people, the people who are out there selling insurance policies, if they lacks a bit, if they don't really give their effort into their winning of business, going out there, making new calls, doing follow-up calls, the failure is reflected within a month. Meaning by the weekend, they start slipping on their targets. By the month end, they find out that no, we have actually hurt ourselves by not being committed enough on the job. So that's where the high-paced commitment comes in. The second example I came across is media. You know, if somebody is making a drama or a movie, so every day involves expenditure. Every day of the shoot involves rolling out money. The equipment rental is costing you money. The location rental is costing you money. Every person who is standing by is costing you money. If you have a director of photography, everything is costing money. Now, if there is certain shoot that is supposed to happen at a certain time of day, and due to whatever lacking, you miss that slot, the whole day's expenditure has to be repeated the next day. So you miss that. Lack of commitment translates very rapidly in media and insurance companies, and I'm sure there might be other areas as well. Any sales, in fact, for that matter. But then, if you're lacking commitment in an organization where the results might not immediately hurt you. For example, if you're running a e-commerce shop and your lack of commitment is resulting into a culture where your customer support staff is not really helpful for their customers. Your hurt will be felt after a year or maybe 2 years with a very significant impact on your sustainability as an e-commerce shop. So commitment is something that is unconditional. Then inspirational communication. Uh, it's a bit tricky when I talk about it because it is very important that you want to inspire people, but it is also very important that you have to have a very clear line of communication with people. People should know that while a leader is inspiring the followers, the leader is also expecting certain acceptable level of effort or acceptable level of work. Obviously, it's a two-way thing. You can't expect a person to give you a market competitive 100% job if you're not paying them a market competitive salary, or if you have a lot of different things which are hurting them as employees. So it's a two-way traffic. But supposing the leader is making the environment available, the enabling environment available, then this inspirational communication can be coupled in. That this is a hallmark of a true leader. Certain bullet points that I wanted to talk about being a leader. Agility is important. You have to be able to sense signals in the market, within the organization, or any stakeholder that you might have, and you have to be very agile into shaping your strategy accordingly. You might be able to, it's not about changing every day what you're out to do, but agility is important. You sense the change and you respond to it immediately. Now, a very long stretch example can be Bill Gates, who at one time held the view that probably I may be wrong, but 64 kbps of 64 MB or something of the hard drive or memory is sufficient for the people. But that did not stop him from becoming one of the most successful men in history, and introducing groundbreaking technologies, and obviously handing over the organization to the next generation of leaders. That's because he held a view and he was agile enough to change it in accordance with the needs of the time. Then effective and clear communication. Effective and clear communication, I'll just divide the two. Effective communication, what it is. uh, Communication can be verbal, it can be written, it can be verbal in a meeting, it can be verbal as a audience address to the group, or any sort of communication. It has to be clear. There should not be any vague messages. A leader with vague messaging is actually creating a lot of ambiguity within its followers, and this is something that every leader struggles with, and they have to be very upfront about any possible lack of clarity. And so clear communication is very much needed, and it has to be effective. You see, if you're a leader and you are uh, you believe in teamwork, and your strategy is that you are possibly you want to take everybody on board, you want to keep everybody informed about the decisions, you want to make sure that nobody is left behind. But in doing so, your communication is to a lot of channels, and it's open. You're having too many long meetings, that might not be very effective. So communication has to be very effective. You should know as a leader that who needs to know what, and obviously it's not right to keep a lot of people in the dark, but you also have to see what information is superfluous for some people. So if I am planning a meeting for a project, and I know that there's a certain team that will only be engaged when certain base requirements are met, and the orientation has to be delayed, my communication will be for a smaller group first. If I was developing a proposal, my communication will be towards everybody, giving them a heads up, but it has to be effective so that I know that people who are listening to me are actually going to have to do something about me. Interpersonal skills are very important. I I'm not a psychology expert, but I believe that if you're a shy introvert person, you'll have a very hard time actually selling your product. But it's not something that is uh, that you are born with, that the earlier leadership literature used to suggest that perhaps leaders are born. I don't believe that. In my experience, I've seen a lot of people who are very shy, very introvert, grow into very strong and successful leaders and overcoming their limitations. So it's not something that you are born with. It's certainly something that you learn. And I think the main differential that these gentlemen or ladies had was that they were consistent and they were hardworking and they knew that they had a problem they had to overcome. And that's the prerequisite, knowing that you have a problem and then you overcome it. So interpersonal skill is without a doubt a very important leadership trait. Then business acumen. Business acumen means a sense of commercial realities of the world and also the commercial realities of your organization. Like, for example, if we take an example of the Citizen Foundation, that's it's a philanthropy organization. They are probably a Section 42 company, which in Pakistani legal terms means that they are not out to earn profit. They will raise money from different sources, and they are going to invest into the furtherance of the objective, which is to educate underprivileged children. So that in that context, the commercial acumen is not very necessary, but still the fundraising aspect requires a lot of significant level of commercial awareness, because your donors are obviously profit making companies. uh, but in leaders in other areas where the organizational objective is obviously to earn profit for the shareholders, the people who are leading have to have a business acumen. They need to know that what their organization is selling and how who are the buyers of that product or service in the market, and what is the best way of reaching those segments. I know an example of a multinational corporation where the brand leader who was recently who was appointed, he ended up being a very senior person within the group on that side. But I heard about his success story that he was in charge of a product that the dhobis use on their dhobi guard, on their washing, where they wash clothes. And that person went on ground to the dhobi guards, understanding what they need and what is their acceptable cost structure, designing the product according to that. So that person's target audience was that particular dhobi, and you'll see a lot of such examples in the sales side and the marketing side in FMCG industry, or even in the pharmaceutical industry, where people are interacting, where people are very much aware of what the market needs, what the shopkeeper needs, and other areas where they're displaying their products. Then there's critical analysis. A leader has to have definitive decision making skills. I don't see it as a bullet point as well, maybe skip, but a leader has to be firm in decision making, number one. But they should be able to they be able to evaluate different options, different facts that are out there. So critical analysis is a must. A decision maker who is very robust but is not able to entertain different views or evaluate different facts of a situation is not a very successful leader. And there are certain things that go hand in hand with that. When you are critically analyzing, that means you need input from your subordinates as well. Subordinates, is my personal view, need to be sharper than you. And I think I've read some literature as well that the subordinates have to be smarter than the leader, so that they are better able to advise the leader that what is the right course of action to be taken. The contradiction can come that if the leader is dumber, that's not the reality, meaning that leader has to have the leadership traits, but on the technical aspects, he needs to be supported by people who are experts on the field. So that input is very much needed. But once getting that input, the leader has to have a quality that to critically evaluate what options are given, what options are available, what are the different pitfalls of different course of action. And so the critical analysis bit is very much needed. And then comes the part where if the leader is indeed able to take decision, and that is very much needed, because if the leader does not have the skill to take timely and effective decisions, uh, there will be always be ambiguity within the organization. People will be unsure about the course of action, and the inconclusiveness will result into stagnation of a lot of progress. So decision making is also very important leadership trait. Fair judgment, um, very important in fact every level, not just a leader level, but leaders are usually more accustomed to facing conflict, facing employee issues where people feel that they might have been wronged. Obviously, when there are performance appraisals, when there are increments, people feel that they might not have been dealt with appropriately. So all these aspects where the leaders are taking decisions, fair judgment is very important. You have to be fair. You have to see that if you're evaluating a person, whether you are evaluating them in the right context or not, in the right skill set or not. So you have to evaluate if somebody has not performed appropriately, whether it was under their skill set to actually be able to perform that task or not. Sorry. Professional skepticism, of course, this is something that is close to heart, being auditor, that you have to have a professional skepticism, and I'm sure that it is part of our literature in the audit side, but it goes without saying in every field where there are leaders. Leaders do have to have a certain degree of professional skepticism, that when they are taking decision, they have to know that something might happen that can go wrong and which can result in the organization not achieving its right objective. Evaluation, obviously, it goes with critical analysis. You have to be able to evaluate the situations. So, in fact, that is where experience comes in. You're not able to evaluate a situation if you're encountering the situation the first time. And I'm not saying that as a hardline case. You may be, if it's a technical situation, you will be probably theoretically equipped to evaluate. But if it's a practical situation, it does take a certain level of insight into the market and the way the industry operates, or the way the competitors operate, or the way that the counterpart is expected to react. There are a lot of variables when we are dealing with practical situations, and in those cases your experience will help whether you are able to evaluate a situation perfectly or not. So if we take this concept to and apply it to practical experience, so when you start your practical career, you are equipped with theoretical knowledge of whatever your educational background is, and when you work on the field, on the ground, you grow, you start encountering situations which are not necessarily part of the literature that you have been taught, but it shows you how to anticipate issues, how to react to different issues. Sorry about that. So that's that. A couple of bits about strategy and other aspects. Strategy obviously is the long-term direction of an organization. By long-term, I don't mean like 20 years or so, meaning it has to be in a reasonable time frame, and it has to be driven by some vision or mission that you are trying to achieve. So level of strategies are corporate, business level, and operational. Now, this level of strategy aligns with the level where leaders are found actually. Corporate strategy is obviously driven by the topmost leadership, and then you have business unit level or operational strategies, which are driven at their respective levels. To give you a parallel, I'll give you an example of, for example, Unilever. It's a public listed organization. You can download the financial statement and see how the organization is actually, what products they're dealing with and doing stuff. So you may have a organizational wide strategy that is driven by the board, and the chief executive for Unilever. And then you might have a business unit level strategy, which is basically based on the overall corporate strategy. It's not existing in a vacuum. It has to be driven from the corporate strategy, but it will relate to the relevant area. For example, hair care or fabric care or other maybe the service lines that they might have. So that means that the strategy exists at different level. So if there's a one leader, one chief executive of company ABC, that chief executive on his or her own cannot drive all levels of strategy. It has to be a collaborative effort. It has to be based on input from the ground leadership. And you can, if you read the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, Covey also covers this in that aspect that writing a mission statement or writing a mission statement should involve all levels of staff. So mission statement is a definition of the organization's purpose, and strategy is much more accurate than that. So if a mission statement has to be driven by maximum level of staff member, strategy is something far more precise. It has to be based on input from all levels of organization. There are certain strategic values that leaders should have. Ethics in business is you'll see it in every professional field that is out there. You see it in medicine, you see it in accountancy, you see it in advisory, you see it in financial analyst side, CFA. Ethics has to be there. Ethics is doing the right thing when no one is looking, and the right thing has to be something that an independent person will also call the right thing. So ethics in business is very much important. There will be a lot of time, especially in a country like Pakistan, we are very far below on the corruption perception index, where we are faced with the challenge that there is a right way of doing things and there is a wrong way of doing things. And that's where true leaders are actually agile enough. And making that ethical choice has to be attribute of the true leader. Corporate social responsibility, CSR, giving to the to the society that is giving you back, and to understand that aspect, you have to understand why CSR. CSR should not be a pat on our back that we went out and then we did an exercise where we spent a day at an orphanage or we spent a day at a beach cleaning or whatever. CSR has to be much more in built in your strategy. See, whatever organization is operating, we'll take an example of Pakistan. We are 200, if we take the official census, 200 million to 20 million strong people. This number is actually the target market for a lot of businesses. People are selling soaps, people are selling cell phones, people are selling cell phone connections, people are selling clothes and whatnot. So this is the target market. So if an organization is successful, if a leader is successful from selling their products and services to this populace, they have a responsibility to give it back. And giving back should be in the same proportion. There are a lot of organizations in Pakistan which are typically called Setia organizations, but they do amazing philanthropy, and their philanthropy is impactful. I won't blanketly say all of them are doing it, but a lot of, as you know, that there's unofficially the Pakistan is the most generous philanthropic society, but that's a lot more to do with the black money that is outside the banking circle, and people are actually being philanthropic but not from the banking channel. So that is one angle, but then the CSR is very impactful in certain area and not very impactful in the other areas, and those organizations need to really introspect that whether their CSR activities are in proportion to how much the society, they are taking from the society. So if an organization is making 38 billion rupees in a year or 50 billion rupees in a year and giving back with one day cleaning job at a beach, it's not really very impactful CSR. Corporate governance, it applies to the way the organizations function on a governance level. Governance means how their board of directors or anyone who is charged with governance is set up, number one, and behaving, number two, and whether they are evaluating their own performance. So corporate governance relates to that, and obviously there's those lines of operation carry on to management committee and then further below. So these are strategic values that you have to be ethical. Your CSR has to be impactful as well. Nobody can force you to do that. It's something that a true leader reflects back to the society. And corporate governance, you have to have respect for corporate governance. You have to respect the independent directors. You have to respect the audit committee. As a leader, you have to respect with all the checks and balances that are out there on you, whether it's audit committee, internal auditor, external auditor, you have to be respectful for them. Okay. Then just an overview, it's more to do with the literature that you are studying, and I'll explain it as in real life. The first aspect, what is strategic management? First aspect is the strategic position that an organization is taking. This is the definition of the strategy. And obviously, there are different options that the organization is faced with. There are multiple routes to becoming a manifestation of your mission statement. So your strategic choices have to be defined, and then you have a strategy in action. So this is just a small steps that are there, but I'll relate it back to the one trait that I mentioned, agility. Your strategy might be very successful, but you have to be very agile to respond to any change that requires your strategic shift. One example, classical in your literature, you might read is Kodak. Kodak once was the global market leader in photographic equipment, and the reels that were there. After the invention of digital cameras, Kodak lost its market share significantly, and now it's trying to regain market share in a very niche area. One example can be BlackBerry as well. They were market leaders in cell phone companies. Both these companies had a choice in the timeline. They might have done things differently, which might have sustained their position as a market leader. Because being a market leader and holding that position means that you are reaping the benefits that are out there. So it's not something that somebody with more money than you came in and bought you out. It was something that you lost to the innovation that was going on. Very old example, I'm not sure whether the audience will be young, old enough to remember, is in Pakistan, there used to be certain brands, like back in 80s, there used to be certain brands that were market leaders. Like for kids, there was chewing gum. It was the market leader, absolute market leader. There was no other chewing gum. And there were certain candies that are out there. So they were market leaders of their respective right, and they were all over Pakistan. They did not innovate. They did not invest in marketing. So whenever the opportunity arose, a new player came in with not a lot of distinction in the product, slight distinction in the product, uh, new advertisement, fresh advertisement, targeted advertisement, and they ended up taking the market share. Now, those market leaders are not even observable in the market as far as the kids snacks is concerned. And if you take the example in Pakistan, just the kids snack, you'll see a rapid shift of market leaders. Things have really replaced previous ones by a new innovative player. And now you are seeing certain companies which are balancing with a different portfolio and then constantly reinventing their brands. That's because you have to be agile. You design your strategy, but that doesn't mean you don't think about the strategy for the next 5 years. You have to be very quick to respond to those changes. So that was a bit about leadership and strategy. Was too much to discuss. It'll be good to answer the practical questions that you might have, or some questions that you might have which require practical insight. So shifting gears a bit to organization culture. Before even explaining. Obviously, you guys are either studying or have studied the literature. You know that what organization culture is, but it's a bit different from understanding it from outside. I'll just give it a very layman explanation that when you start working, for example, if you are, I'll take an example of the audit firm. You enter an audit firm, you'll find that there's a culture, there is a way people are doing things, there are a way people are structured, and before stepping into that office, all any exposure that you have regarding what to expect is technical. You have read accounting standard, you have read standards on auditing, you have read the Taxation Act and Companies Act. So the only dimensions that is visible to you is technical. And when you step into that office, that dimension will only be tested once you're out there doing an audit or any other work. Similar with working in any other company. Your technical bit will come when you're actually doing a work. Before even that, you are exposed to the organization culture. You interface with HR first. You first experience that how you are being treated as an incoming person, and then you start off as a member of the team. And I'll take an example that you're starting off from the bottom. You're starting off from the start. So you are facing a work environment where there are certain expectations from you. There are ways of doing things. There is a day in, day out. There's a monthly activity. There are a lot of rituals. I would call it ritual. It's basically reportings and other formalities. So there's a lot of different aspects that are needed to run an organization, and which might not be taught in schools. And people read that. People do get up to speed on that. It's not something to scare you. Everybody, meaning people like you and me, are basically running these organizations. And this is what Steve Jobs also said, that your vision changes when you understand, if I recall correctly, that it's people just like you, people no different than yourself, were there out there changing the world. So that's the trust that is needed. So in the organization, a culture is the overall feel, overall total belief system, traditions that are shared, and this will vary. In an extreme example where you have an autocratic boss, very rough with the subordinates, the environment will be that of fear, intimidation, and lack of growth. People just working, and there are a lot of organizations like that. Trust me, people are just working there because they've got bills to pay. Meaning we can't just walk out of an organization because the boss is bad. It's a very tough situation that anybody has to deal with. On the other organization, you might come in and you see that it's chaos. You've got foosball tables, you've got table tennis tables and everything, but there's complete lack of clarity. People are not really processing things formally. Things are informal. Meetings are long. It's total dysfunctional culture. And in the middle of thing, you will find the maximum variety of organizations, which are basically driven by how the leaders have cultivated the culture. And a lot of organizations, including local organizations, do emphasize on a good working environment, a respectful culture, and a culture where everybody's professional objectives are met. So corporate culture is basically a system. It does drive from the tone at the top. That much I can say. The tone at the top matters for setting the organization culture. So corporate culture, it has to have certain key characteristics. Innovation has to be there. Innovation and risk taking should be encouraged, but it cannot be a blanket statement. There are some jobs which may not be suitable for risk taking. For example, if there's a complex engineering setup where you as a technical person are joining in, but if I take an example of accounting, uh, you join a firm where there's a documented audit approach which is there. There are compliance objectives that are being expected. There are quality review expectations for things. So risk taking and innovation, as far as it's not in line with the literature, is can be risky and can be discouraged. But keeping in that example, I'll share another example. If you go, for example, I audited an airline, and there was a challenge that you are sitting at the head office, and the organization has millions of tickets sold throughout the world every year. So, what is the perfect audit approach? So, when we studied it, came up with an approach. uh, that innovation is very much appreciated. That if your approach is achieving the audit objectives, it is addressing the audit assertions, it will be appreciated as innovation. But other than that, you have to be very careful in certain areas where you're being innovative. Attention to detail is has to be part of an organization culture everywhere. You see, if there is no culture of attention to details, there's a risk that you might do a job that is less than perfect, and in certain roles that cannot be acceptable. If you're working in a law firm, if you're working in an audit firm, if you're working in any other consultancy, your lack of attention to detail may mean that you end up delivering a less than acceptable level of product or service. Attention to detail in normal side, that if you are on the industry side, that means a difference between entering into a loss-making contract or entering into a proper commercial arrangement. So your attention to detail in every aspect is very important. Outcome oriented has to be, the organization culture is misguided if it's not outcome oriented. If people don't know that what is my expected level of output in a month, in a day, in a week, or in a year, uh, the organization culture will be chaos. People will rely on the other people to be achieving the organizational objective with nobody having a very clear definition. Culture has to be people oriented. People cannot be secondary. People have to be first. I've seen very brave example of certain companies where they have put people first in front of customers. And if you visit like McDonald's, you'll see there a very polite notice that you are expected to be respectful towards their employees. This is something that you don't read. Like first thing you come across is that customer is always right. That might be so, but not at the cost of the dignity of the staff that is involved. So that's one thing. You have, your culture needs to be people oriented, team oriented. Uh, team needs to be established. Teams need to be established. Teams need to be seen as growing. When the organization is meeting their objectives, the teams have to be very much prominent as being responsible for achieving those objectives. Aggressiveness, a little caveat on that word. Aggressiveness is determination towards achievement of the objectives. That is where you need to be aggressive on meeting the targets, and you'll see the culture everywhere. People are meeting the targets, but then you need stability as well. Stability is something that you don't want to rock the boat too much. I know the example of one of the uh, pharmaceutical companies which we were dealing with. We were actually analyzing them for possible partnership with a Singapore equipment manufacturer. And their CEO came in personally after we had our meeting and assessment. And he just said that I would not like to go ahead with that arrangement. Uh, that company had 3 billion rupees of revenue, and that addition to the revenue could have easily meant another a billion per annum. It was a big significant boost. But that CEO was saying that I have a very defined level of products. My team is attuned to the market of that product. Introducing a new service line, a new product line, will divert and cause a lot of disruption to my existing people and cause a lot of stress. It will add to their objectives. I will not like to go ahead with that. So that was a very respectful thing, that because obviously nobody would want 100% entire new workforce handling a new operation. They want to be focused on their strategy. That means letting go of certain things as well. And I've personally dealt with that as well. Like for example, 2 months earlier, There was an organization that approached, they required some consultancy, and they did not like our pricing, and we did not go ahead with that proposal, although we had a very good offering. We were technically competent and everything, and though that organization was not someone we were dealing with. But I made that call that considering my environment, my team's expected utilization, that is not something that I want to engage myself for 3 months. And that step, that decision paid off, because 1 month, 1.5 months later, I got a different assignment where my team was utilized more appropriately as far as the risk and reward return is concerned. So you have to be aggressive, but not too aggressive that you're taking on each and every challenge that is coming your way. You have to know that how to maneuver. So these are some key characteristics of corporate culture. Importance, obviously, if you have a good organization culture, people are your ambassador. People will speak good things about you, with a caveat, of course. There will always be challenges. An organization cannot be without challenges. So, but a good organization culture means that good talent comes to you, good talent stays with you. People feel that they are engaged, they are not locked, and then there's an energy and momentum within the organization, a sense of achievement. People know that what they're achieving, so that clarity is needed. Uh, View of work has to be changed. You see, there are a lot of roles where there's not much enrichment into the role. For example, if you're a customer support representative, you are expected to follow a certain script. You are expected to solve a certain number of tickets in a day. You are evaluated based on the number of tickets you solved, and the number of tickets you solve properly. Uh, so there are certain roles where there's no definition of work that is going to be other than what you are actually tasked with. But then you have to gamify that. If you are treating people like machines, they will be burned out. They will not lose their incentive. You have to gamify that. By gamifying, I mean that some organization attach rewards and incentives to the way people are dealing. If people are more polite, people are rewarded accordingly. For example, again, I'll give you an example of restaurants where you might have seen that one of the people might be carrying a badge with 4 stars or 3 stars. One person might have their picture posted on the wall. So these are certain attributes. All of them have a very defined job description. They are expected to work like clockwork, but their role is enriched by rewarding different attributes that the customer is expecting. So your definition of work is changed if your organization culture is good, but in those roles where definition of work has to be very strict, the gamification or other efforts introduce a different level of definition of work. So other things, a good organization culture will create greater synergy, and that is something that I as a leader want to ensure that my organization has. Uh, it's good to have one leader with the respective connection with each of its team, but it's also very important that those teams are also working among themselves in a coherent fashion. It's not like they become one giant team. They're all still distinct teams, but their internal functions have to be managed, and they have to be very open, clear, and productive and effective. So that aspect is something that synergy is only introduced if your different teams are functioning within themselves with the same efficiency they're working with you. And that is a piece of caution as a leader, that as a leader you have to work on every front. You have to see that you're dealing with the subordinate right, and that subordinate is working with the other subordinate properly or not. So these are some considerations. Makes everyone more successful, and it's not like rewarding everybody. You will have, if you once you become a leader after developing through whatever career path takes you, uh, not everyone will be performer, and not everyone will be somebody deserving of a reward. But if your majority, there's a very small minority in your team that is being rewarded, that is being grown, problem might lie with you as a leader. That either you're not able to attract more talent that is there, so that only small fraction of your team is actually performing, or some you may have a talent retention issue as well. So, but in some cases, the lack of performance will have to be confronted as well. So, one goal of the leader would be that a good organization culture has to make everyone successful, but also make them more accountable as well. Okay, so those were the certain talking points that I covered regarding leadership, regarding strategy, regarding organization culture. I hope I was not going too fast or making a bit sense. And if this Q&A can be started, I'll take questions.
Right, thank you very much, Zishan. We have a couple of questions asked by a student. So the one student, Shoaib Rabbani, is asking that what important leadership skills should be improved in doing the business. And he further adds on that he is currently in the field, though he has not mentioned that he is doing his business or not. But since he's in the practical field, he's asking while doing the business how to improve the leadership skills. So I guess that's a very generic question.
I'll try to be specific as far as my insight is concerned. You see, I say 16 years of experience, and I'm a fellow chartered accountant now. But on December 2002, I was also sitting in the audit hall, wondering what is going on and how things are going to be shaped up. So there has to be a start. The way I would, my insight is, and what I've practically implemented, and what I've seen other people commonly achieve, is that at the start of your career, when you are part of a growing, you're starting up, you have started up, and you are part of a team. You might have 5 people, 10 people, 20 people like you working over there. And at that moment, that is not the time where you don't think about leadership. That is a time where you display attribute of being a perfect field member, a perfect team member. And I think in a very summarized way, it has two aspects to it. A, be available for work, and B, do the work right. So that's very these two attributes define your commitment towards the job. So that's where you start, because being a leader does not automatically comes naturally. For example, I see I do give in fact I'm giving a lecture or probably a talk day after tomorrow in Karachi University as well. They are also interested in probably in the business side, and the message I want to give them is, and in fact there are certain business schools that automatically want to become leaders after stepping out of their college or universities. That is not a sense of entitlement that should follow with your organization and growth. Fortunately, for the accountancy side, whether it's CA or ACCA, you are expected to be part of a team and then grow into a leader. So once you are part of that team, that is where your commitment to work, your ethics, your attitude, that all works. So when you are part of the team, you have to be dedicated, and you have to give your 100% to the job. If you don't enjoy the job, you have to be carefully thinking that what is the problem. If you're the problem or the company is the problem, there might be something. You also don't want to be working hard for an area where you're not being rewarded. So be very cognizant of the fact that who you're working for. But other than that, it's just doing your job to the best extent possible, and constantly learning from people, from information that is out there, and the organization. So these are the fundamental traits where you will be technically and practically equipped to call anybody a leader. And then comes the people part. Once you know how to do the job, and then you have to take a step back and let somebody else do that job. That's where you manage the people. And some of the traits that I said, when you're dealing with people, you have to give clear instructions, you have to give clear expectations, you have to give clear idea about the timeline of doing some tasks. You have to be very upfront and candid about feedback. Don't sabotage your superiors, subordinates. Don't sabotage them with vague instruction, watching them fail and then making them accountable. That happens a lot in sales side and everything, where leaders are sabotaging their subordinates. So don't do that. If you are technically sound, you know how to do that person's job, but then your people skill should kick in. That I have two responsibilities: A, to the objective that this guy is performing or girl is performing, and B, towards the betterment of that guy or girl. So those people have to grow as well. So leadership skill is primarily know your job or subordinate's job, and B, then be a good people leader on that side. And obviously, some of the traits that I said, you have to keep your eyes and ears open. What is going on in the society? What is going on in the country? We don't live in a vacuum. A good leader, in the very broad sense of the term, that you might one day lead your company, you might become a CEO. That would not just come from being a very good executionary. That would come from your insight on what is going on around in the world that affects you and everybody else in it.
Thank you, Zishan. We have Fatma Zulfikar, who is asking that currently she's working in the Middle East in the healthcare organization.
Okay.
And she's asking that how she can actually improve the organization culture where she feels that the people are resistant for change. It's a very good question.
There are two problems, Fatma, with this question. A, this session is recorded. So I sympathize with your experience. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, and I don't know, I do deal with a lot of Middle Eastern organizations. Uh, uh, I've worked in Middle East a long time back. Maybe things have changed now, but I worked in the Middle East, and I know about the cultural challenges and the practical challenges that are out there. I hope that the new generation of leaders in the Middle East organizations is learning about the value of human talent and value of organizational culture than their predecessors, because obviously every generation, I would not keep Pakistan as an exception to it. Pakistan had gone through, I would say, 2-3 generations of work cultures. The first generation work culture was actually building up the country. Those guys were unbelievably dedicated. They were working with a fraction of the resources that are currently available to the most mediocre organization right now, but they were introducing excellence in their work. The second generation came in, who was a bit in the middle of both. The third generation is now coming in, which is now faced with a very rapidly changing global scenario. Rapidly, we can either be very isolated in the world, or we can become the next Asian tiger, or whatever, howsoever our leaders can explain it. So even in Pakistan, we have gone through a lot of different changes. So similarly in the Middle East, see, in the Middle East, you have to understand where the Middle Eastern business environment, how business environment is shaped. There are certain organizations where they are closely held family organizations, where you'll see a lot of good people at the top level. And I know a lot of people who are second in command in a very large group in the Middle East, and they themselves have been treated very well, and they are treating their subordinates very well. So their organization culture was driven by the leader. But then there are certain organizations where organization culture is very bad. I mean, people are not treated with respect, and people are not treated with the right dignity. I would say there are two ends of the spectrum when you're dealing with Middle East. I'm not sure whether which end of the spectrum your healthcare lies, but let's assume that people are at least willing to entertain new thoughts. You know, Oscar Wilde once said that the mark of an educated mind is to entertain an idea without accepting it. So the first criteria that your leadership has to have is whether they are able to entertain an idea without accepting it. If you have that leeway with them, then you have a chance of actually doing something. But when you are having that conversation, do keep in mind the commercial realities. What are you asking? For example, if somebody comes up and say that no, we need to have, I'll give an extreme example. Obviously, I'm not aware of what situation you're facing. But if somebody comes up that we need a departmental picnic every quarter, we need a CSR activity every half year, we need this, we need that, and that person, you see from the leader's perspective, immediately their mind starts working. Okay, so that means this much time off work, this much time in planning, people losing focus, we have a deadline coming up, things like that. So whatever suggestion you want to give to your management, they will be least resistance to change if A, they themselves have this quality that they are agile, they want to understand new ideas, they are willing to give you 5 minutes to listen to you. And B, if you are considerate enough to not suggest anything which will damage their operations or hamper their operations. Because sometimes what happens is people who are creating new ideas, they completely forget about the commercial realities of it. And in the obviously in the healthcare facility, it's a bit different, but your suggestion has to be practical as well, and you can evaluate it. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong. You see, if you come up with a suggestion, a good leader will tell you why you're wrong and then educate you, and you may come up with an alternative strategy. So if you instead face a backlash, a reaction, a strong reaction, you have to evaluate that maybe you're not in the right place, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with coming up with an incorrect new idea, and it's the job of the leader to actually correct you and then build upon what you're saying. So that's, I think, some insight. Hope
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Thank you, Zishan. We have Zaman, we have Ibad Ali who is asking how much corporate control is necessary to exercise in improving and managing corporate culture.
Uh, Sorry, there's a constant phone call. Let me just. Sorry.
So, right, Ibad Ali is asking how much is the corporate control necessary to exercise in improving and managing corporate culture?
I didn't understand the question. How much?
I think he wants you to quantify how much of the corporate control is necessary to exercise in bringing the improvement and managing corporate culture. It's again
Okay.
a bit vague,
Okay.
but it's very generic.
What you're trying to refer to, and I'll give you some pointers about further research. See, there's a book. I'm forgetting the name. It's about organizational politics, something like that. And you see, when I say organizational politics, I don't mean it in a bad way. Every organization has a power structure, and some people are more influential. I'll take my example for it. Uh, Even before I became a manager, even before when I was I'm a partner now, but even before I became even a manager, there was a certain level of freedom I had, which probably some of my counterparts did not have. There was some aspects where I knew that my superiors were considering my opinions differently because I was adding different level of value. It's not like I was the only one adding value. I was not the only one. There were a couple of different people who were awarded as such. So there were certain people whose opinion mattered, and that happens in every organization. Uh, uh, there are people on whom the leaders have more reliance in, possibly because they have stood by them in tough times. They have added value through some organization, some input or the other. So it's not an algebraic equation where I give you that 60% of your voting power or 60% of your power will translate into something. You have to understand that in any organization, you should know who the decision makers are, and it entirely comes down to how much trust those decision makers have on your input. Okay, and that trust is earned. That trust cannot be bought by certificate, and that trust cannot be bought by your qualification. If I walk into company A, B, C tomorrow and say that, look, I'm such an accomplished partner, I want to join your firm, and this much and that, and they would not automatically start trusting me. To them, somebody 2 3 levels down my level will be more trustworthy rather than somebody new coming in. So it's not about the degree of control, and that happens sometimes. I've seen people joining in as department heads where a second level resource has had stepped into their shoes for 2 3 months or 4 months. They have earned the respect of their superiors, and that department head starts feeling insecure, and friction starts developing. I think what I've seen smarter department heads reacting with is partnering with that trustworthy employee, making him part of his team, and then building upon that level of trust. So, to answer your question, there's actually not a lot of algebraic definition that you can give. You have to see that organization culture is driven by leaders. If leaders have created a culture where everybody is given an equal chance of giving suggestion, they will entertain your thought. But in any setting, in any new organization, with any team that you become part of, even if after entering an organization, being successful there, you're working on a task force on a government side, you still have to earn people's trust, and that trust is only earned through your value that you add.
Thank you, Zishan, for that wonderful answer and the detailed one. We have Zaman Channa, who is asking what should be exactly done to improve interpersonal skills and effective communication, given that you have had experience in the MNC environment as well.
One caveat I would like to give you, interpersonal communication should not mean foreign accent. That is something that a lot of people, because you gave an example of MNC. If the question was just about interpersonal communication, I would have responded differently. But you gave an example of MNC, so I sense, and that's something I might be judgmental, but I sense a sort of stigma attached to MNC that they might have better communication skills. Communication means my idea gets communicated to your brain in the way I intend. That's as simple as that. You can communicate in Urdu, English. I mean, the idea is that if we are in a setting where we have to both achieve an objective, that objective is achieved, and you will see the market behaving accordingly, and an overwhelming market behaving accordingly. If somebody is judging you of having good interpersonal skill just because you have a foreign accent, of having good interpersonal skills because you can speak English like a foreigner, that's not the right mean definition of communication. The communication has to be that howsoever you speak, you get your idea across. Meaning, who is more successful than Google CEO Sundar Pichai? He's been Indian brought, and if you listen to his English, it's totally an Indian accent, and he does not lose that because that's not the point. He's a very successful businessman. He's a very successful visionary engineer. He does not need to prove anything to anybody by imitating somebody foreign. So one thing that you need to do is effective communication does not mean a foreign accented English. You have to divide that, and that's never necessary. In an organization where you are judged based on that, that's not a right organization to work in unless you are working in an organization where they have US based customers who might be who are dealing with public customer services where there is a required trait. So that bit should be aside.
Thank you, Zishan. That's the common perception about the communication skills, where they focus lots of on the accent pronunciation rather than on the main content, the knowledge of the language they're speaking. Right. So we have Ibrahim Amjadin. He's asking a very interesting question. He goes in asking, what is the daily set of challenges you face in your duties as a leader in Big Four firm? And I think with that, I would also add on, which we were talking about earlier, that on a daily basis, what set of skills you exhibit and what exactly you have been doing in order to improve your leadership skills.
Okay. I'll take it sequentially. That's one of the skills that I have to exhibit, is to componentize different challenges and then respond accordingly. The first task is that what are the different challenges that I face on a daily basis? That's the first question. Obviously, you see, we are an professional services firm. I handle forensics, consulting, and risk advisory of financial institution. Uh, at the heart of it, we are a firm that is out there to provide services to the market in consideration of remuneration. So we have to very understand what is our role in society. Just like, for example, Zong is or Mobiling is selling telecommunication products. We are selling professional services. So it's a business. So all the firms that you see, we are a business that we are operating in. As part of as a partner in that firm, I am one of the businessmen who is responsible for the operation. So the first challenge that I face on a daily basis is business. That are my targets okay? Am I going on the right track? Am I taking in the right work? So that's the first challenge. That do I have the right amount of work to keep all my team engaged? Uh, and if my targets are met. But that doesn't mean that I overdo it. So the other challenge that I have is that I have to balance the need to take in more work and the need to manage staff burnout. Uh, I have a different service line. A lot of people manage their department differently. They have their probably AMs working on 6 to 7 jobs at a time. In my line of work, we cannot afford that. I need my assistant manager very focused on the challenge, because we are dealing with practical challenges. We want to advise companies that how to solve their problems. So I can't do that if my manager is split into 4 different directions at a time. So my challenge is, A, do I have the right amount of business? And B, have I set up a pipeline very accurately so that none of my staff member will unnecessarily get burn out? I would say unnecessarily, because I also wanted to say that we don't work weekend, but this weekend we worked. So I would be a hypocrite if I advise anybody that we don't work weekend. We have worked weekends sometimes. So my challenges are first and foremost business and people. It goes hand in hand. If I'm professional services firm, I cannot deliver quality service if I don't have the right people, and if I have the right people, I'm not managing them perfectly. So that's the main challenge. Other than that, obviously, the challenges can be task oriented, they're industry oriented. uh, uh, every quarter or every half year, I may be faced with a challenge that the market needs a new products, needs a new solution. Am I responding to that need or not? So these are the 2 main challenges. Other than that, there are 29, 30 different things that are on your mind. You're managing that. Uh, Now coming to Almas, your question about skill set that I need to exhibit. Uh, you see, what I need to exhibit means what people who are observing me can see and can gauge me against. First is obviously a sense of control over how things are moving, and that's something I do struggle with. I have to control my day and my week, that if I'm achieving all the target objectives of the day or week or not. So that's one thing that I have to exhibit, that my targets of a day are being achieved and I'm on a proper track, that my clients' expectations are being delivered. And I have to appear firm and quick in decision making. So every day there will be some challenges, some new business development, some new trajectory that the engagement is taking, where I have to take decisions. Obviously, it's an educated decision. It's not something me. And although my team is very much attuned to my requirements now, but even from a very early stage, when I was a supervisor or an assistant manager, I never used to give full guidance. I always used to say to my subordinate that come with a question and your insight on what could be the answer, and then we'll talk. Because otherwise, there's no exchange of ideas. There's actually me telling you what to do, and that's something that I don't want. So one thing that I unconditionally want, I do exhibit decision making, exhibit technical competence, and obviously exhibit need as a learner. In the professional services side, you cannot, and in fact, I have a disagreement with people who want to give a false impression of being a master of all. You don't want to. The very key characteristic of that you need to exhibit is that you're willing to learn new things. That's one thing. And then once you're learning, your subordinate is also learning, and they are having a very meaningful interaction with you. Other than that, with the decision making side, you have to be appearing in control, even when the day is going crazy. If you know that you're falling apart, that's not something that you can show. Do you have to struggle with? I'm very there are certain situations where you react strongly, but the leader has to a appear to be in control and then be actually in control. If it's just appearing in control and you don't have things actually in control, you are in trouble, because things will backfire.
That's the great answer, and that goes in right saying that the example you shared, that self-directed learning plus the learning in partnership. So thank you very much for that. We have Azmeena Lalani who is asking any tips for students, how can they demonstrate better commercial acumen who have never worked before?
You see, commercial acumen, if I define it very simply to you, it's all around you. Just because you have not worked in an organization doesn't mean that you have not seen the society and the economy that is around you. I'll give you an example. Simple milk shop, you see. People who are working there are most likely not educated. They are not sophisticated. They are not qualified graduates from universities, or just in the milk shop, or any even the smallest fruit vendors. They are not very educated people, but you'll see them managing their accounts, or managing their day-to-day ins and outs very perfectly. They are in command of what is coming in, what is going out, how much they are, how to present their product. Even though if you take the fruit vendor, how to present their product. If you even just focus on the example of a fruit vendor, you'll understand what the commercial acumen is. He knows what the product is. He knows that what kind of product, what kind of people are going to be buying. He knows that how much to quote, so that when you start negotiating, it comes down and he does not lose his profit share. And there's a lot of things going on in between, and then there's commercial transaction. So that fruit vendor has commercial acumen. If somebody who does not exhibit any of those characteristics, does not present his product properly on the stall, does not negotiate effectively with you as a customer, does not accurately deal in the financial transaction aspect of the transaction, that will be a very failure of a fruit vendor. That fruit vendor is exhibiting all the characteristics of commercial acumen. Okay, and you can take this example, put it to anywhere, anything around you. Your parents are working, or somebody else is working. What is actually they're doing? If somebody is working in an insurance organization, that insurance organization, you have to just in your mind think about what is the purpose of that organization. If you're talking about EFU, they are selling insurance, so that everything works around that. If you're talking about, for example, Mitchell's, they're a food product business, the commercial acumen. So you have to think about what the things are. So when you go to any organization for an interview, you should have a very clear idea what that organization is doing. You should not just think about their name. You should know that what they are doing, and try to understand that what they might be doing. Like for example, in if you go to a pharmaceutical company, you should not only know that they sell medicines. You should think in your mind that they sell medicine to the shop near your home, while it is being manufactured in West Wharf or site area, and there's a whole system when this manufactured product is reaching that location. So you have to think about that. It's not it's okay if you don't understand it, but it's absolutely vital to know that the commercial acumen means the customer is here, the distributor is here, the production is here, something is happening in between where things are actually reaching their right area. And you see, I think every day your bread is on the shop near you. So that supply chain aspect, you have to just think about those details that if you're going to an organization, you should know what the business is, how it might be working. That will be your commercial acumen.
Thank you, Zishan. This was the last question
Okay.
we received. And before we conclude today's webinar, if you would like to share any words of wisdoms, you kept on sharing throughout the session though, but in the end, if you have any pointers left to share with the students.
Well, there's one statement that I used to be very irritated with when I was a student, but it's unfortunately it's very true. Is that there is no substitute to hard work, and it sounds very bookish, but I've learned it the hard way, and there's absolutely no shortcut to hard work. You might become a very good leader in a very short span of time, but you might not be sustained as a good leader if you have reached there with anything other than hard work. So from students perspective, I would say that don't focus on becoming a leader overnight. uh, you have to become whatever the field you're operating in. There's a I'm forgetting there's a religious quote as well that whatever you do, try to achieve excellence. That's one message that I would like to give you, and that excellence is achieved by hard work and constant learning.
Thank you very much, Zishan, for the brilliant set of advices, admonishments you have delivered through today's session. And with that, we would like to formally conclude today's webinar. And those of you who are going to attempt the SVL exam in December 19th session, so wish you all the best for the greater success. And we will be sharing the recording of today's webinar with all of you via email. So wish you all the best in your exams and careers in your life. Thank you very much. Take care. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.